the session, what you want session, that would be really helpful. So we're going to talk about why 360 feedback is particularly relevant at the moment in the current climate. I'm going to explain a little bit about what we mean by 360-degree feedback. So again, it's helpful to know whether or not you've got any background in it, if you're already expert or otherwise, how you can use 360, so some tips in terms of how you can manage and run a 360 process, if that's something you're thinking about doing, and the different ways in which 360 can support your business. And then Katie will jump on. Thank you, Steve. Oh, the Donkey Sanctuary, what a fantastic place to work. Steve, that sounds fabulous. Okay, so you've got staff survey suggested that you have a 360 tool for all line managers. Got you. Okay, brilliant. So an overview is going to be good for you. I certainly, my background was learning and development for a large organisation, and we used to do that. Every couple of years, we used to do a 360 feedback as part of our manager development. So that's certainly quite a useful tool. So I'll do the sort of overview in terms of best practice, and we've got various documents, and I've done podcasts on this topic as well if you want to refer back to anything. And then Katie will give you an overview of our Actus 360 solution, so that you've had a look at that. So should anyone be interested in a solution, you know what it looks like, and any information that you want about that. So if anyone else wants to tell me what you're interested in or where you're from, that would be lovely. Thank you very much, Steve. And I will carry on from now. It's really helpful to have a bit of feedback in the chat to make sure I know that I'm talking to people. Okay, so why do we think 360 feedback is particularly relevant at the moment? Well, obviously it's a personalised development tool, so it makes sense, and I can see, thanks Jodie, learning and development. I was an L&D, as I said before, and that is something where it fits particularly as part of an L&D or an OD type tool. So there's a couple more people just coming in. So it's really useful because it is personalised. And so especially I often found with senior managers where you want to give them something which feels more of an investment in them. If you can also do the feedback, then that works really, really well. And actually both of them, the two of you who said you're in learning and development, we used to use our internal team to do the debriefs on the 360. And that was a really good way of building a relationship with our sort of core audience, because if you do a 360, everyone feels a little bit vulnerable during a 360 feedback, and I think it's a real position of trust. So I used to find it was a really great way to build those relationships within the organisation. If you've done someone's 360 feedback, they would have talked quite openly and frankly, bared their souls slightly, and that gives you a strong relationship going forwards. So that was just my experience as an internal person. And of course, that's useful in terms of career planning. So, helping people think about where they want to go, what their skills are, how they can develop their skills in terms of real gap analysis. If you did things like internal assessment centres, it could play a part in that. And it's a real investment in people. So it's a tool that people may find it is valuable. So it's likely to support retention. Now, the other reason it's feedback is really relevant at the moment is if you have still got a dispersed group, if people are still working remotely, at least partially, then there's an argument that, particularly in a hybrid workplace, that those who are seeing the manager more frequently might be getting favoritism. So it's a balance for proximity bias, because you're getting feedback from a range of people and people who you're actively working with. So that can be quite helpful for people to see how that's going. So it provides balance rather than just one person. And if you think in an actual appraisal, if it's just the manager feeding into it, they maybe don't work with you so regularly or don't see you as much as they used to. So this provides a good balance. We also know that if you have cultural issues, engagement and retention, any kind of cultural issues, they're very much related to how managers manage. And therefore, using 360 feedback, particularly for people like line managers and leaders in organisations, gives you a real sense of the skill levels and engagement levels within your managers. And if you have had feedback like Steve's had, that people said they'd like to see in the staff survey some more feedback, then it gives you that specifics about what it is, that maybe some managers are getting really great engagement feedback and some are getting less great, and it gives you something really tangible you can work with them to develop. I think most of the other ones you can read there, the whole idea about well-being and mental health, because you would generally, I would always recommend you, if you did a 360 feedback, you would use it in a supportive way as opposed to a critical way. So I'm not a massive fan of sort of using 360 feedback to rate performance. I see it as something that works really well with people's behaviours. So again, that wonderful one-to-one coaching support that you can provide with it can really help mental health. And then the other benefit is useful if you want to have visibility of skills and competencies. So if you put your skills and competencies within a 360 feedback tool like Actus, and you run this tool over a period of time, then you can also get macro reporting, which gives you the visibility of the key skills and behaviours in your organisation. It identifies gaps that you can see whether you're developing key skills there, and again, it doesn't matter where people are positioned. So you get that macro reporting, which you don't necessarily get otherwise. Do feel free, those of you who just joined, I can see Elise and Natalie just came in. Anyone else, pop anything in the chat, let me know what you're interested in, where you're from, really helpful. So just feel free to do this. And I have got other resources. If you are someone who's trying to work out how to do 360 feedback, for example, we've got other resources and webinars that I've done on that topic. All right, so thank you for the two of you who've said it already. I'm not certain, of you on here, how many of you have actually either experienced 360 feedback or delivered it? If you just want to put a thumbs up in the chat, or just yes, have you delivered it, or have you had a 360-degree feedback yourself? It'd be useful to have a sense as to whether you've experienced it or not. Elise, I didn't know you could put thumbs up on your person like that. That's good. So you've had it. So Elise, have you received it or delivered it? So Ed, you've had it, experienced it. I'm not sure if you're an Edward or an Ed. I've shortened. See if you've done both. Great. Okay. And when in terms of those of you who have experienced it, what sort of experience was it for you? Was it a positive experience, or what were your views in terms of how you felt about it? Was it powerful? Was it stressful? Because I asked this question because it will make a difference in terms of how you manage 360. I remember very clearly when we started rolling out, I worked for Siemens for a number of years and we rolled out this 360 program. And I remember one senior sales manager storming out for 360 feedback saying, who said this about me? Which actually was really quite damaging. And we had to do quite a lot to build the trust for people to be open and honest in that feedback. And my experience from that is one of the things about whenever we deliver feedback, I've got a process that I recommend people use if they're delivering it. Yeah, so usually, much more usually, it's a really positive experience for people. Great, I'm glad you've had that experience. Yeah, great. Okay, so you found it really helpful because it's so personalised to you, isn't it? And I think that's the massive benefit of it. So most of you obviously know what 360 is therefore, so I'll skip over this slide pretty quickly, but just explaining it's graphical and qualitative feedback, so specifics, gives you insight and sort of comparison as well to see where certain people perceive you in a certain way. We recommend that it's anonymous, except for the line manager, and the purpose, it should be used as a self-awareness and personal growth tool. Just a few very simple tips, and as I say, I've got more information on this for anyone wanting to go into more detail, and we also provide that for our Actus 360 customers. If you are doing something 360, what I'd say is don't do blanket, as in send out very generic 360s to lots of people in one go. The reason I'd say that's dangerous is people just get fatigue, they don't get good quality feedback. You have to remember, for every one 360 report, there's probably 10 people who've got to respond. So if you do a lot at once, I had one company that wanted to do 300 at once, you'd find that the same people are getting asked for feedback by multiple people, and that would be a real problem. The other thing is being clear about your question sets. Make sure that you have got question sets that are relevant to the person that you're doing. So we work with our Actus clients to help them define questions that fit with their own internal competencies or values. We've got a directory of sample questions that you can take from, and we also have specific templates sitting in Actus if you want some that are off the shelf. But the key about the templates are, there's one for senior leaders, there's one for middle managers, and one for individual contributors, because the wording of the questions needs to be relevant to the role for people to feel value in that. So that's quite key. I don't like reports being emailed out. I much prefer to talk to people about it. It may be in like 5% of people who have something negative in a report, but people need to be supported to process the 360. In my opinion, it's best practice to talk people through it to make sure that they take something constructive out of it. And I also think it's really important to make sure you have the opportunity for free text and narrative, because the ratings are all well and good, but fundamentally they often raise more questions than they answer on their own. So make sure that there are some free text comments to allow people to give context to their ratings. The do's, I think they're the flip of those in many ways, but the ones that I haven't picked up there is overseeing respondent selection is quite relevant if possible. So I recommend, if it's going to be sort of process in your organisation, that you ensure that people use respondents that, if they're going to invite their direct reports, they should probably invite all of their direct reports to respond, unless there's a reason not, like someone's very brand new. So occasionally I hope where people are being very selective about their respondents, either to get highly challenging feedback or to try and get much nicer feedback. And that all is a reflection of whether or not they trust the process or not, whether they're trying to game the system. And it will make a difference as to how realistic the feedback is. And definitely protect confidentiality in terms of the response from the individual. It's their report for their development, and also for respondents. So those are the things that I would say are do's and don'ts. Let's have a quick, yep, that makes sense. That makes sense, Elise. Yeah, something voluntary. If people want training, then they could have that opportunity. It's an investment, and then potentially they get a coaching session, and it gives them some, and that coaching session could be then for them to decide how to develop those skills in a certain way. In terms of running and managing an effective 360 process, so think about what you want to achieve out of it. So be strategic, make sure you've got the right level of templates and questions ready to go in there, which are appropriate from a seniority point of view and appropriate to your organisation. Make sure you don't ask too many questions, because people, they'll get fed up. You don't really want it to take a respondent more than 10 to 20 minutes to complete. So I would say 20 to 30 questions is the maximum, including free text comments. And that's to make sure you've got a balance of both. If you are going to roll it out in your organisation, what I would say is very helpful is if you start at the most senior level. And the reason I found that to be very helpful is that often, the most senior people are the ones that are going to be asked to give feedback on others more often, because they manage people. So if you roll out to mid-managers, then those senior leaders will be requested to give feedback on their middle managers. And also, even further down an organisation, everyone wants to know what the CEO thinks, or the directors think. They want feedback from them. They yearn for it. And the risk is that these people won't respond sometimes, or sometimes they are the ones who really, really need the feedback. Sometimes they haven't, because if they haven't experienced it, they almost don't value it or respect it enough. So if you are going to do it, if you can do it with your senior team first and make sure they get that feedback, they'll realise they get that slight butterfly in the stomach. We all have a slight psychological response to, if someone said, I want to give you feedback, it actually invokes our fight or flight, even if it's really good. So, even the most confident person is slightly nervous about receiving their 360. So if they go through that experience and find it powerful and valuable, or they find that the quality of this feedback isn't very good, then they will deliver better for others. Basically, they will role model it better if they've experienced it. It's interesting as well, you notice that as you do 360 in your organizations and trust builds, the quality of the feedback that people provide, the written feedback, generally improves. And again, so sometimes when people think Big Brother's watching them, they won't write anything. But if they've had 360 and they trust it, then they're much more likely to give good comments to others. So culturally, you're developing a feedback culture, a positive feedback culture. Always make sure that minimum response numbers are honoured. So Actus will help you sort of fix that. So you have a minimum of 3 responses. It won't generate the report, because you don't want, if only 2 out of a set of direct reports respond, then it's really easy to work out who said what. So you don't want that to be the case, for people to feel identified, because again, that breaks trust with it. Professional one-to-one feedback or coaching, I've got that separate, there's an entirely separate episode on that. There's a webinar that I've done. We'll send out to you the links to the previous webinars and the HR uprising notes on these if anyone wants those, and I can roll another one in future. But one of the main things that I do is that I have a process that whoever I'm doing 360 to, I will always do some scene setting. So I'll ask them how they're feeling. how they selected their candidates, and get a little bit more about that. I also say things like, bear in mind that this is feedback. This isn't necessarily reality. It's always someone's perception. So we have teachers at school who are really high markers and low markers. So everybody, I would always give a very standard introduction positioning. And then, of course, it makes it easier for you to deal with anything that people find difficult to deal with. And that's why it's quite important you do that scene setting. You can then coach people through. Usually it's very positive, but occasionally people focus on negatives. So it gives you that balance, having set the scene. And it should always be something that's seen as constructive and for people's development. It's just awareness and it's choice as to how we behave and how our behaviours are perceived. Okay, so those are sort of the top tips, really. In terms of this, if you're thinking about something, Actus 360, if you're thinking about that, this is how you can sell it to your organisation from a strategic value point of view. As you could argue other 360s as well. It's a retention tool. So if it's important for you to retain and develop talent, if you want to embed your values, you could put questions in about your values to see whether people are living them and actually see a pattern of the way in which people are demonstrating value-related behaviours at a macro level. If you've got dysfunction in some way, it can be a useful way of doing that as well, but you don't want to single one person out. You probably want to do a group. Return on investment on training. So we used to do internal management development courses, and we would we identify what the skills were we were trying to develop. So let's say it's a people management skills, the team leaders course or something like that. And we'd have questions around the various aspects or competencies related to team leadership at the start of the training course. So you get a benchmark, and then at the end of the training course, this is when there were sort of modular programs, a few months afterwards, we'd run it again, and you could hopefully see a shift in people's behaviour. So that's actually really valuable for the individual in terms of their benefit, but it's also valuable for those of you in learning and development, being able to demonstrate a return on investment on your training, which can be tricky. If you want to develop successors or career pathways, you could identify a 360, which is for, let's say, a leadership or a more senior role, and you could have the competencies in there. And then if you're going through an assessment centre or people are interested in that role and they want to develop their skills, then they have got a nice a development plan that would come out of it. So you do a 360, not against what their skills are now, but what their desired, the skills that are related to the desired role, and people can identify where they need to stretch and grow. You can also use it for strategic skill gaps you might spot in an organisation that you need to develop, I don't know, collaboration or trust, or it could even be related to more sort of technical competencies. You could have technical questions in there as well. Use that as an identification of where you've got strategic skill gaps. And the whole sort of psychological safety is quite a buzzword in many ways, isn't it? It's really about making sure that people feel safe. So anything like this is encouraging feedback to be a constructive activity in your organisation, which increases a sense of psychological safety as long as you manage it really, really well, i.e. give coaching with it. And overall, it develops your culture. And I remember my experience at Siemens, I remember sort of at the start, people had real sort of, they were quite apprehensive about it, a little bit cynical. And I remember thinking 3 years later that it became, because we used to roll it as they over 18 months or 2 years where managers would get it as part of their development. And I've realised that the culture had shifted. Partly it had contributed to a real improvement in openness and honesty and trust and feedback in our organisation. It happened really sort of gradually, but 3 years later, you can really feel that difference in culture. Okay, so just a couple of slides before I hand over to Katie. Here, it's just a little bit to tell you about Actus 360 now so that you can be familiar with it. So this is a hosted 360 platform, which means that we host it securely for you. You don't have, you own the data, but we do the hosting of this platform for you. So it's your personalized logo and colors. You can tailor email messaging, you can have different questionnaires, designs, all of those. You can create infinite numbers of questionnaires as you wish, or you can just use our standard competency templates. So it's really straightforward and easy to use, and we've got very straightforward pricing as well. In terms of the feedback reports, Katie will show you in a moment because it's nice to see them in person, but they're really nice, comprehensive feedback reports. And the benefit, of course, of doing something like this and having your own platform for those of you who are internal is this whole macro data, because you don't get that if you just go and do the odd one report. If you go to Thomas or something like that and just get the odd reports, then actually this allows you to manage more the fields that you want to see and show progression over time. And that's where these are some images of the reports. I think that's a good point now for me to stop sharing and hand over to Katie. And while Katie gets her system live, if anyone's got any other questions about the process of 360, please do feel free to pop anything in the chat and I'll keep an eye on that.
Great, thanks, Lucinda. Hopefully everyone can hear me. We have a massive internet broadband issue in the local area. So what I thought would be a good place to start is, should you choose to take up Actus 360 now, I wanted to show you the feedback report that's produced at the end of the process. So once the feedback has been captured. So this is an example report, and these reports can be downloaded as a PDF, so you can do that face-to-face feedback with the individual. So the report itself will show who was invited and who has completed the feedback. There's an introduction in terms of welcoming you to the your report, how the report has come about, and how to interpret your results. And the report itself is broken down into, the first part is a spider graph, and this is a really good way to have a at-a-glance view of the ratings by the respondent groups. So if we look at each of these categories or competencies, for example, the line manager has scored themselves most highly within the interpersonal relationships the individual has, yet the line manager has rated the lowest there. So that gives you that snapshot. The rating scale includes a not applicable, because there may be people that feel they cannot answer that particular question, so that doesn't skew the overall averages. But then it's 1 never demonstrates through to 5 always demonstrates. So we come down and the first thing we see is the competency summary. So for all of the questions related to leadership, the individual rated themselves an average of 4, the line manager 3.8, the direct reports, the colleagues and peers. So the overall average for this particular competency was 3.4, but the range of ratings for each question was between 2 and 4. So you'll see that's the same across each of the competencies. We then come down to the detailed responses. So for the category of communication, this is the question, and the ratings works in the same way, where an individual rated themselves, where a line manager, the direct reports, the colleagues and peers. So we come down. What you'll also see here is within our standard templates, and we've used the senior leadership standard template for this example, is we recommend asking for examples or comments to support the ratings in the section above. So apologies on screen, there's just a blur of colours, but I'm just going through the questions here. So then we come down and we have, what does the person do particularly well, areas you'd like to see them develop, and any final comments. And in our experience, the comments are the golden nuggets of where you really also get tangible information that as an individual you can take from that and start to think about hidden strengths and development areas. We then give you a respondent summary table. So this shows each of the respondent groups, and it shows the competencies and the questions within it. So as a heat map, this is showing me, for argument's sake, that under adaptability, the line manager has rated the lowest in this particular answer set. But then the same for stretching and achievable targets, they've rated the highest there. So that gives you a quick snapshot view. We then see the likely strengths and development areas. So this takes every category. It shows you the highest rated statements and the lowest rated statements. So this really is about identifying those hidden strengths and perhaps development areas. And then the next sections are, you have the ability to adapt the text within this. The idea is it's a simplistic development plan where if you're sat with the individual and providing that feedback, they can start to think about, okay, what do I do well, how you could develop those or utilize them further, alongside areas that that individual would like to work on and how they would do that. The last section is a next steps. So that is, again, you can tailor the text that is within this. This is about providing a summary and giving a template should you wish to thank people who have put time into providing that feedback. And if you have a very strong feedback culture, this is a really good idea, because then people feel valued for providing the feedback in the first place. I'm just going to quickly jump into the system and show you this. So please excuse me. In terms of using the system, I think as Lucinda alluded to, we would use your colours and your logo. But in order to set up a new 360 survey, it's a very straightforward process. You choose your template. We've provided you with 6 templates already, from individual contributor, team leader, senior leader, through to the engaging manager, change agent, and sales leader. For the purposes of this, you can see it just says Katie test purposes, but the idea is you can create as many different templates as you like. In terms of completion date, it automatically defaults to 3 weeks. 3 weeks really is best practice. Any earlier than that, you might have people on leave. Any longer, you'll get people drop off the radar of providing feedback. However, the system has built into it the ability that it will send out prompts. So at the end of week 1, and you could set those prompts up to come daily as you get towards the completion timescale. You can see here the questions, and in effect, you would select the individuals that you want to provide the feedback, and you could type in an email address here. So some organizations also use their external partners to obtain feedback on. Once this is then saved and submitted, an email will go out to everybody who's being asked for feedback. They click on a link in the email. They'll then come to these questions, which will look something like this. And it's a case of purely selecting the relevant question and then free text answers within the comment sections. So to actually send out a 360 feedback is a very straightforward process. At any moment in time, I can see the status of any that I have in progress at the moment. And then let's just take a look at this one that's in progress. What this enables me to do is to be able to remind people if they haven't yet completed their feedback, I'm able to send out a reminder or a prompt to anybody who we are still awaiting feedback on. Bear with me. So here I can click remind and I can select the individuals that I want. And here is my text of my email. So in terms of reminders, you could do that if you have everybody's feedback bar the last few individuals, and it's a quick way to send a reminder. You also have the ability to absolutely customize any text that is within those email templates as well. Once I have all of my feedback back, I'm able to view the results on screen. So this is the report that I've just shown you. And then I can come down and I can download this as a PDF. So I can download it or I can print it. So in essence, the process to use it is very straightforward. We normally would then give a login for a sort of central administrator function to be able to set them up, create any new templates, and I'll show you where you do that in a moment, send them out, send the chasers and the prompts, and then they are the people that will have the completed feedback. So it isn't visible to the individuals until the point you download it and share it with them. Lucinda touched on, before I jump into how easy it is to customize reporting, what you have the ability to do, as Lucinda alluded to, is to run reports across the organization. So if I come into this, I'm just going to pop back to the year 2022, and I want to select a specific template. So I am going to select a date that's actually today. Bear with me. I'm very sorry, my system is a bit laggy because I am using a MiFi. I can select the template. Let's just select the team leader template. And then what I can do is put a date range in. And if I click search, this will then show me, sorry, help if I put a date range of last year in. There we go. So what this will do is show me for an organization. So if I've just run a 360 feedback across the senior leadership team, I'm able to then see for each of the categories of questions, I'm able to see the ratings that the company has returned on average, but then I can also see the individuals against those ratings. So in this particular example, Dan Test has rated on average 2.3 for delivering results, and Thomas has delivered 2. The company average is 3. So it shows us not only where we are at an organizational level, but where the individuals are performing against those particular ratings. And you could even break it down if you wanted to by each of the questions that were asked. And with any of the data within Actus, you're able to export that to XLS or CSV. So in terms of that macro level reporting, it really enables you to get that wider view as opposed to it just being a single or a silo view. In terms then of, we give you 6 templates, yet it is very straightforward to be able to modify those templates or add your own. So we can see here our particular templates. If I edit this particular template, here's my intro text, my development text. I said you could tailor that. I might decide I don't want a particular question out of the standard set that we give you. Conversely, I might decide that actually what I want to do is add a question. I can free type my question. I can add question information. And then essentially I can select the category. So it's very straightforward to set up templates and to be able to create as many different templates as you like. And then in terms of the feedback itself and nature of relationships, we have set up these nature of relationships. But everything here you can tailor. So it may be that you actually want specific colorways. You might want to add a new level of relationship, such as external parties, partners, whatever that might be. Conversely, with our question categories or competencies, we have added a huge range here, but you could just add your own in. So the system itself really, it's very straightforward for you to be able to customize it and have it exactly as you want in your pitch and tone, your competencies, your language. And the same thing for the emails that go out. So we have different reminders set into the system. You can also add in your own reminders. You're able to tweak those templates. So here is an example of the 360 request. As you can see here, it's quite detailed, but again, you could change that. So some organizations we work with will reference communication from the CEO or as part of our culture of building feedback, whatever it might be. So a bit of a whistle-stop tour, but hopefully that's just given you some insight into the Actus 360 tool. It's a plug and play off the shelf with the ability for you to customize it. So before I hand back to Lucinda, were there any questions on the system? I don't think we've got any questions. I'll stop sharing. Lucinda, you're on mute.
Sorry, I thought I'd clicked it, but obviously hadn't. Right, am I showing the right screen now, as opposed to my whole screen, which was last time? But am I sharing now?
Yes. Yeah.
Good. Okay, perfect. All right, so so many of you are familiar names, so you know this anyway. But as I put in the chat, we have lots of value-added resources. There's podcast episodes that I put on a chat that's on this topic if you'd like to learn that way, and also this complete guide to 360 feedback. Plus, to be honest, if you choose to work with us, you know, we've got real people. Myself and Katie have got a huge amount of experience in this area, and we will support you. But what is the actual Actus offer, just to clarify it? So if you wanted to have this internally for within your organization, as opposed to if you're an independent HR professional who wanted to do it for consultants, we have an affiliate version for those. You'd have your own in-house, fully branded, securely hosted 360 and survey platform. So you could also use it for pulse surveys. In terms of the initial offer, you get 25 free individual reports for the minimum sign-up spend. And then if you want to buy others as you go, you can buy them in bundles, basically. You get 6 ready to go templates. You can do your benchmark reports, etc., that Katie's shown, all those things that she's just gone through with you. And we can also do things like training for 360 training if you wanted to learn how to do that and want to support. Or we also have 360 coaches who can do the feedback for you if you wanted to use that externally. So those things are available if you are interested. In terms of the package, for an in-house setup like one Katie's just shown you with your 25 individual reports, the package starts at just $17.50. I say starts from, that's how much it costs for that amount. If you want to then buy additional licenses, you can see the reports there. So it's a really transparent offer, basically. And for those of you who've ever done 360, I know how expensive it was when I was in-house. It's really good value for where you might go and get 360 from anywhere else. So certainly I remember paying, and we're talking close to 20 years ago, I think £75 a report then. So this is a great value, and I would certainly have used this if I'd been an in-house person. So that's, hopefully you've been able to read through all of that in terms of what's available. And then it's an annual rolling license. Obviously, like if you had our Actus software, it's the same sort of thing. And incidentally, if you did expand and want any of our other modules, then you could add those on as well using that same database. So hopefully really straightforward and clear, and maybe something to consider. If anyone wants to know more about this, again, please just pop in the chat your queries or questions. We will send out a follow-up email with links on and these slides, so you've got something to refer back to. It's letting you know in terms of if you're interested in joining any of the webinars and events that I do regularly. We have all of these running on a regular basis. I do those sort of things. Yeah, and we'll follow up with you and just find out if anyone wants to. Yeah, I appreciate this is a group webinar and you're having a look in the background perhaps at lunchtime. So myself or Katie will just follow up and see if you've got any questions on a one-to-one basis. Okay.